Oops, one more. All right, so just want to say welcome. Let me pin myself. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for showing up, for being here this evening. We're super excited for our second crystal workshop with Shonna. Really excited to get into crystal gridding and also to sit with cacao and to have her share from this beautiful embodied wisdom of working with the earth realm and the minerals and the crystals and the stones. So just want to say thank you to Shonna and thank you to each one of you for showing up today. As a reminder, this will be recorded, so I'll go ahead and pass the mic over to Shonna.
Hi, friends. I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm particularly grateful to Florisaire for allowing me to share this wisdom again. The first time we got together, we talked about the mineral kingdom and crystals and all of their magic and power. And so tonight we are essentially expanding on that knowledge through learning about crystal grids and how the union between sacred geometry and the mineral kingdom can really help you manifest in a magical way. I feel that a large part of my walk with cacao is integrating the earth wisdom of Mama Cacao with the earth wisdom of the mineral kingdom. And so I wanted us to all sit with a cup tonight before we align to this wonderful magic that is crystal gridding. So I will keep our invocation fairly short because we do have a lot of crystal energy to move through tonight. But if you have your cups, and you want to just bring them to your heart center, I invite you to do so now. And just settling into the space, shaking off the energy of the day. Maybe your day is still in flow, just allowing yourself to be here for the time being and welcoming in new wisdom, new downloads, anything within your DNA that wants to be remembered, because nothing is really new. You know all of this already. Taking a deep inhale through the nose and an audible exhale through the mouth. We bow in reverence to Mama Cacao for the wisdom that she bestows upon our life. And we give gratitude and thanks to the communities of Indigenous peoples, the elders, those working within the communities to share this medicine. We honor the four elements, giving thanks to the heart of the earth, giving thanks to the heart of the sky, Father Sky, giving thanks to the heart of the sacred waters, and giving thanks to the heart of the sacred fire, knowing that we cannot survive without any of these elements or our interconnectedness to these elements. We give thanks to the heart of hearts, the heart of self, the you within, the you that knows, the extension of source, and that light within. I wrote a poem for Mama Cacao, so I'm going to recite it now, and you're more than welcome to just repeat line by line after me, either in your mind's eye or aloud, whatever feels most aligned for you. Mother Cacao, sacred you are. Root us to earth and help heal our scars. Allow us to go deep within our hearts to receive the wisdom you've brought from afar. Allow us the power and patience to hear the voice of the ancients and the voice that is near. We honor, we value, we respect your use. Please guide us now to our highest truths. Bringing your cacao just underneath your nose and taking a deep inhale. Allowing yourself to be enveloped in her aroma. At this time, if you have an intention For the space we're holding together tonight, you may whisper it into your cup now. And whenever you feel ready, you may kiss your cacao. Thank you each for being here. I'm so grateful. I have 4 pages of notes that I took to keep me aligned. Otherwise, I can go off on many tangents, especially as this cacao starts to open me up. I'm very passionate about the mineral kingdom. I've been walking with crystals now since 2017. I dreamt of crystals in 2017. My grandfather brought me an inheritance of what I now know to be amazonite in the dreamscape. And I've been walking with crystals ever since. That dream led me to this store, which I'm sitting in. This is my baby, my retail space, Cosmic Flora. We are a metaphysical space that shares the medicine and education of crystals with the Oklahoma City Metro. And so we invite people here to heal. And I'm really excited to share tonight one of my favorite practices with each of you, and that is manifesting through crystal grids. So let's get started. What is crystal gridding? Yes, an introduction to crystal grids. Essentially, if you can think about crystal gridding as sacred geometry and the magic of the mineral kingdom colliding in order to use the energy of sacred shapes to amplify the energy of what is already within the crystals. So to give you an understanding of crystals, I'm going to talk to you about crystals in a very condensed Cliff Notes form. Yes. So if you can think about crystal being the overarching term to describe rocks, stones, minerals, crystals, geodes. There's so many different names for everything which encompasses geology on Earth's surface. And so when we say crystal, that is what we're referring to. Crystals in particular do have their own structure. But when we say crystal, a lot of times we're taking everything and we're scooping it up and we're putting it all in the same pot for ease of access, right? So when we say crystal, that's what we mean. When we use the term crystal, we also are encompassing like semi-precious gemstones as well. So you might see like, emeralds or aquamarines or morganites sort of looped in there too. So healing crystals can be used in a lot of different ways. And one of the most fascinating things to me about crystals is the history behind them. When we look at all 7 continents, we see crystals there. Whether it's, in Africa or it's in Scandinavia, it doesn't matter where we look, we find crystals embedded into the tradition, either being worn as a sign of regality or for protection, or like the Norse Vikings used to use crystals to guide them. They would try to find the light in the clouds through crystals. So there's so many fascinating ways that crystals have been used and continue to be used throughout cultures. We see lots of indigenous communities connecting to the energy of crystals and stones to prophesize. We see the Chinese dynasty using crystals as both a tiding of good fortune and abundance, but also after childbirth, women, the yoni egg practice actually originated in the Chinese dynasty. They would wear a jade egg to help them regain pelvic floor strength after childbirth. So if you've ever held real and true jade, it is very heavy. So I once put a jade egg in, and it was not postpartum, it was before I had my son, and it immediately fell out. So kudos to those women for doing that after childbirth. So it's really fascinating if you start to look at the history of crystals and see them really embedded in all of these ways. And I think that's why our fascination with them continues, because it is one of those ancient practices, very similarly to cacao, where there's a lot of history. We can see it, you know, by looking at the vessels and seeing different cultures using them throughout the course of time, right? Not just the Mayas, but the Toltecs and the Olmecs as well, and the Aztecs as well, right? And so there's this energy of mystery surrounding it. And I think that's why people are so curious. When it comes to the healing aspect, I get so frustrated when people call it a pseudoscience because of a few reasons. The first being, we know Earth has a geoelectromagnetic pulse. And just because you take geology away from Mother Earth doesn't mean that its heartbeat stops, right? Earth is different in her function than we are. She's an energetic being. So these crystals still carry the energetic pulse of Mother Earth. It's interesting though, because we were talking about this on a call the other day with cacao, you know, someone seeing a hair tie, right? And or a bracelet, right? And they're looking at it and they're like, but that's a circle. And you're like, no, it's a bracelet. I can wear it, right? So it's that energy of science not quite understanding the spiritual reverence of crystals and why they were so important throughout the course of time as relics and totems of intention and in prophecy and in prayer for so many cultures. So there's that point. But then also we have really fascinating things that happen like with quartz crystals. So quartz crystals carry something within them, and quartz is a varietal of stone. So I want to be clear that clear quartz isn't the only stone with a piezoelectric current, which is what I'm about to talk to you about. Quartzes come in many different shapes and colors and sizes, but when you squeeze a clear quartz, it emits something called the piezoelectric current. So there's actually a current running through this crystal right now. And every electronic device that we have has quartz crystals in it. From medical devices to our laptops, to our cell phones, to our watches, they're reliant on the power of Mother Earth to help them run and function, which is amazing, right? So if crystals can power our devices, and if we trust them enough to power our medical devices, why can't they heal us? They can. Yeah. So that's always my fun little spiel about crystal energy. And I think it's fun to have that in the back, you know, in your back pocket when you're met with someone who maybe gives you resistance, because you will come across those people. I'm sure you come across those people with cacao, right? It's the same thing. So that's crystals, the Cliff Notes version. Does anyone have questions about those two, kind of intro to crystal gridding or crystals, before I move on to sacred geometry, the Cliff Notes version? No? Okay. If you do, you can type them in the chat or just unmute yourself because we're cozy tonight. Okay. So sacred geometry is also known as the universal language of creation. Everything within our 3D reality is made up of geometric shapes. And I don't know if you all are familiar with the Fibonacci sequence, but I highly recommend that you do some deep diving into the Fibonacci sequence, which I can type for you in the chat. You're also going to get this. We're going to email this document I typed up to you after, so you can kind of go into everything. But I'll read you a little bit about the Fibonacci sequence. So the Fibonacci sequence is a sequence of numbers discovered by Leonardo Fibonacci. He also has more names, but we're just going to stop there for time's sake. Its sum equals close to 1.618803, or PHI phi, which is known as the golden ratio. So we've all probably heard that term before. The key component by which nature creates itself. So everything within the universe falls within this mathematical equation. It's so interesting. You can go down a rabbit hole on YouTube of Fibonacci sequence videos, and I highly recommend that you do. But basically what we're doing is we're taking some of the sacred geometry shapes, both through our crystals, because a lot of crystals are carved into sacred geometry shapes now, and also through the shapes that we're making within the actual grid itself. So we're taking the energy of universal creation and the energy of Mother Earth creation and fusing them together. So when it comes to crystals, it's very interesting. And I think this is such a cool job to have. But throughout the course of time, within all of the cultures that we've spoken of, there are people whose responsibility it is to sit with these stones and determine what their energy or their essence is. And you can do this yourself. I always say what you're seeking is seeking you. And you can seek out a crystal and not even ask, to know what it is, and just see how it starts to turn the tides in your life. It's a really powerful practice. For me, the stone that I dreamt of was called amazonite. And amazonite is a stone that allows us to align to the energy of our authentic voice, speaking our highest truths, feeling protected in new business endeavors. And it came into my life during a time that I was transitioning from a very vanity-driven career as a professional dancer into this more soul-led career, working with crystal energy. And I didn't know how to fuse those worlds together in a way where I was living in the Bay Area. My very tech-focused clients wouldn't think that I was an absolute nut who was jumping off the deep end. And that stone came into my life and really gave me the space to move in flow and start to allow my worlds to collide. So it's really fascinating when you start to think about what you seek is seeking you, and that energy of placing your intention out into the universe and seeing what comes in. Really, that's what crystal gridding is all about. It's about intention. It's about sacred geometry, and it's about using the energy of crystals to connect all of that together. And it's also really beautiful. A lot of people set up grids around their house just as decor and don't even know what the physical benefits or the healing benefits of that can be in their space. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we keep moving on. I want to talk to you particularly about two shapes. But before I do that, I do want to say one other thing. Your DNA is sacred geometry, right? Like we've all seen the helix, the double helix shape is a sacred geometry shape. So even we are made up of sacred geometry. So when we think about creation, it's not outside of the human race, it's all, right? We are all interconnected. So the two shapes I want to talk to you about tonight are the two shapes that are on the grids that I'm sharing with you. And I emailed them to Jen. So, oh, boom, there they are right there. Look at her. She's a master of the interwebs, the technological, all of it. You can click that and it will show you the grids that were the two shapes I'm about to talk about. I think it's important to say that you don't always need to go spend a bunch of money to crystal grid, right? Like there's these really beautiful grids that you can buy that are wooden and hand carved and this and that, and that's great. And then there's also, paper grids that you can print off on the internet and make wonderful things out of. So I want to show you some different examples. The two shapes that I'm sharing with you tonight are the Flower of Life and Metatron's Cube. So the Flower of Life encompasses the energy of the cycle of creation and interconnectedness. So it's that energy of everything we've already been talking about, right? And how sacred geometry and crystals work together in grids to even make things happen. I'm going to show you a grid that I have built here. I'm just going to kind of tip my camera down so that you can see. And the base of this, can you all see that? Yeah, the base of this grid is the Tree of Life. It also has a giant dragonfly carved into it. This was a gift. And I'll explain to you about the placements of the crystals and all of that a little bit later. But that is an example of like a Tree of Life base. This is a mandala from an adult coloring book that I colored and cut out. And you can use this as a base as well, right? Once you know the different shapes or start to kind of play with the shapes, you don't necessarily need that Flower of Life underneath. It's just an option. Hearts are sacred geometry too. So I liked the idea of using hearts. I actually use this as an altar placemat for a cacao ceremony I hosted here. So yeah, you could do something fun like this as well. And then the other thing I'm bringing in, it doesn't even have anything on it. You could draw the Flower of Life on here, trace it on here if you wanted to. You could also print off that paper when I'm sending you and glue it on here. But this is just one of those little wooden coasters. And you can pretty much find these everywhere now, right? So you could also just leave it blank and pretend like it has a flower of life on it. Once you can see what it looks like, you can grid from there. So just wanted to bring that in really quick. Any questions about sacred geometry, the Cliff Notes version? No? Cacao break? Okay, so understanding shapes, grids, and crystals. So I want to talk first about crystal shapes and meanings because crystals have tons of different shapes that you'll see when you walk into a store. And a lot of times people are like, what does that shape mean? What does that shape mean? And so I want to talk about a couple of different things. So the first I want to talk about is the point, right? We've all seen points before. This is an obsidian point. They also call them like obelisks when they're shaped a little bit differently, more like an Egyptian obelisk, and then towers usually when they're shaped like this. Okay, this is I use these in crystal grids as a generator crystal because they create an intentional energy vortex from the base through the point. So basically it goes like this, right? So when I'm placing it flat on the surface, whatever my intention of that grid is coming up and out and through the point and back around and down and up and out and through the point and back around and down. It's just making this intentional vortex of crystal energy, just constant cycle. Spheres. We've all seen spheres before. Or do you want me to grab one? We've all seen spheres before. I'm in the shop so I can run off camera and grab things if I need to. Spheres are as they sound, just a spherical crystal. Okay, so a continuous circle. And circles, so when we look at a sphere though, it's a 3D circle, right? So the energy of circles is continuum. But when we're looking at spheres, they emanate energy in all direction, like the sun or the moon. So when we're using a sphere in a crystal grid or in a gridding layout in our home, or even just placing it at your desk or whatever it might be, that is the purpose of it, is to emanate energy in all directions, just like the sun or the moon. Double terminated points. This is a point that has two. So if you see, this is a single terminated point. But if this point was more prominent and it was like, boom, boom, right? That would be considered a double terminated point. This moves energy in both directions when they're double terminated. So you have energy coming out of this side and energy coming out of this side. These are my favorite crystals to use for healing on the body. So I might place it on the solar plexus or the heart chakra and it's shooting energy out of both directions. This would also be another good example. Okay, cluster. We've all probably seen clusters before. It's like a flat crystal. I'm just gonna grab an example. BRB, because I want to show you. So this is considered a cluster. This is an amethyst cluster. Okay, so it's got a flat geode base, and then it has a little clump or cluster of crystals on it. Okay, clusters are great for radiating energy in various directions. So if you don't want something that's so, I don't want to say rigid, but if you're not oh, the energy needs to go to the east, to the west, you're I just want the energy going. This could be a good one to use for that. And then pyramids. We all know what a pyramid looks like. Pyramids create an energy and fountain it out to protect the energy within. Okay, so when we're looking at the energy of the triangle and the energy of a pyramid, it's very similar to the tower energy, but it's going out in order to keep what's within the pyramid safe. So I think it's cool with pyramids, especially, and we'll talk about activating your crystal grid and programming your crystals in a second, but with pyramids specifically, I think it's really important to activate the energy of the crystal through written word because it's protecting what's on the base. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. Manifestation crystals. I don't have any of those to show you, but imagine if this crystal, I would have to dig. I'm sure I do, but I'd have to dig through everything. Imagine if this crystal had another tiny little crystal within it. Have we ever seen crystals like that? No? Okay. Well, there are sometimes crystals, they call them manifestation shaped crystals, where another crystal is forming inside of it. So it almost looks like it's a pregnant crystal. with a little baby inside of it. And that's what they also call it, the baby within. Okay, so used for abundance and manifestation. It's a really powerful crystal for the energy of fertility. And when we think about fertility, we don't just think about, babies and the creation of life. We're thinking about seed planting and what we can grow. And then palm stones. Those are the flat, round crystals that are about the shape of our palm. Okay. Those are for calming and soothing energy in the mind and the body. So that's what we're working with palm stones in a grid for. And then tumbled stones draw off negative or bring in positive energy. So a tumbled stone, these are both tumbled stone. This is hematite. It's just a tumbled hematite. And this is a tumbled tiger's eye. Okay. Versus like a raw stone is going to give you more of that raw, earthy energy. Okay. So it's going to be a little bit less refined and a little bit more natural, primal. That's kind of the energy of a raw stone. This is a raw amethyst. So any questions about crystal shapes and meanings? I think the one I didn't cover on here is the heart shape, which obviously connects to the energy of love. Love and heart healing.
I have a question, Shonna.
Yes.
What about these ones, like the circular ones? Did you
Oh,
mention
so
those?
those are called a pi crystal, like pi, like 3.14, but they're used in gridding and healing work for balance. Yeah. Any other shapes that y'all might have? That was fun. I'm like, any other shapes that y'all might have that you maybe want to ask about?
Guess like a wand, like
Yeah. Is it like a selenite wand? Does it have points at the end?
got a strawberry quartz wand.
Okay,
It's like rounded on, it's like long and skinny and it's rounded.
okay.
And see,
Cool.
yeah.
So those are typically used for massage. The rounded wands like that. You could use them in a grid and it would still emanate the energy in both directions. But when we're looking at a point that's really, triangles and points are the energy of manifestation and pushing the energy out. A rounded point is going to be more of that soft energy, like we talked about with the sphere, emanating from all directions. So you could still use it in a grid, but those are really good for body healing work.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting.
Yeah, pressure point, especially like if you want to do some trigger point therapy with that. Yeah. Anything else?
I have another question.
Of course.
So I have some like the quartz, clear quartz, and it's like one is very intentionally pointed, but the other end is like raw. So is that still like a double?
I would still consider that double terminated. It's the same
Okay.
as like this, right? This one,
Okay.
it's not intentionally carved out on one side, but this is still very clearly a point. So I would still use it as double terminated. And I think the same for this one as well.
Okay. And then what about if it has 2 points on it?
Oh, that's called a twin flame.
Oh my gosh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's called a soul twin. Yeah. So that one's really good for if you're doing like a grid for love or companionship or, any of that kind of stuff. It's wonderful for that. Yeah. What else? Anything else? Okay. So moving on to grid shapes and purposes. So I want to teach you 3 basic shapes today because I want to keep things simple and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I want you to feel like, oh, I got a lot of knowledge, but it feels really accessible. And I also want us to have time. I want to do an impromptu grid. So we're going to do like a card pull and then we're going to build a collective grid and do like a little meditation and then I'll disassemble it because I want to talk about activation and disassembly and stuff too. So 3 basic shapes: circle, triangle, square, if you want to write those down. All grids can be used for protection. Okay. So gridding goes as far as your intention behind it. That is the most important thing. It's just like making a vision board, but you're doing it in a 3D way with the addition of sacred geometry and healing crystals and their powers. But you have to have a very clear intention of what it is that you're calling in. So I want to talk about activating a crystal grid. And this is one of the simplest ways to activate a crystal grid. I also do this to my vision boards. But the crystal grid that I showed you earlier on the wooden board is the one that lives in the shop window closest to the front door and behind the check stand. And so it's a grid that encompasses the energy of good vibrations, protection of the space, and abundance flowing into the space, as well as groundedness, because I think anytime you're doing spiritual workings, you need to ask to be grounded or you'll get scooped off into Never Never Land. So the energy of this grid gets reset, like we cleanse it and we reset it probably 2 to 3 times a year. But this grid, we've been building on these crystals for the last 4 years. So really potent, really powerful. It's done its job in a wonderful way. I also have a little statue of Ganesh on here. He's known as the remover of obstacles in Hindu philosophy and Hindu faith. And so I got him in India and I like to keep him here with me. So you can put other things on your crystal grid besides crystals, was the point of me sharing that with you. But activating your crystal grid and also cleansing your crystal grid are 2 really important things. So before you ever set a crystal grid with crystals, it's important to make sure that you cleanse the space in which you're setting the grid. So whether you're setting it, you know, maybe in your office or in your bedroom or wherever, just cleansing the space. And then also cleansing the grid or whatever you're using for the grid. Because if you think about maybe one of these wooden coasters that you pick up at Cost Plus World Market, or this coloring book that someone has probably thumbed through a million times before it comes home to you, their energy is all over these things. And so it's important to just cleanse it. And so there's a lot of ways that you can cleanse the energy of things. Smoke baths are my favorite. You can use lots of different herbs. It's a very quick and easy way. My second favorite are spirit sprays. So I make these and sell them at Cosmic, but you can make one yourself. I love to use like rainwater or a natural form of water. So if you live near a river, like a natural river or a stream, you can bottle up some of the water. And then I'll add maybe like Palo Santo. That's like, I'll usually soak it in gin or vodka for a few days. Just, you could also do rubbing alcohol. It doesn't smell quite as good, but to pull out some of the resin from the wood. And then I'll pour that in here as well. If I'm in a pinch and don't have a couple days to do that, I'll do Florida water. And then I'll put crystals down in here too. Shake it up, shake it up, shake it up. Whatever like protective herbs and things you like, you can add those in here too. Spirit sprays are wonderful because there is no smoke. And so they're great to be used in places where you can't light things on fire. Oftentimes your work. I don't like to smudge my car because it takes forever for that smell to get out of my car, right? That smoky. So yeah, I like to use spirit sprays in my car. They're also wonderful for gridding because we can cleanse the energy of our grid without it being too intense, right? Whereas like if we're going to smudge our grid with sage, sage clears everything. And it's beautiful for that, but we don't want to clear out the energy of our grid because we're building on something. So just think of spirit sprays as less of like a cleansing agent, like let me say a clearing agent, and more of like a cleansing agent. It's kind of like, oh, I'm just going to give that like a little refresh. It's like tidying up your house versus doing a deep clean. So I like to make these specifically for the use on crystal grids, or like on myself throughout the day where I'm just like, oh, I'm feeling it. And I'll just like spray myself. But you can spray your grids with these, and it's really nice to just kind of like reset the energy. So I would say before you go to build a grid, make sure that your crystals in your grid are smudged. So using like sage, and then maybe following that up with some Palo Santo, and then giving the energy of your crystals your intention. And that's the activation part that we're going to talk about now. So activating your crystal grid, really easy to do with the power of spoken word and written word. So all you need is a tiny little Post-it note, and whatever it is that you're trying to call in with your grid, go ahead and write those things down on your Post-it note and stick them on the back side of your grid. And now we're ready to activate our grid with those intentions. So you can speak that over your grid and just say like, thank you to the energies that have made their way into this space and help me in creating this grid. I am asking for the clear intention of boom, 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 boom. And that is how you activate your grid. Okay, so back to, I kind of got off there. That's why I have notes. Back to the shapes, okay? So circles are for unity, completion, healing, and boundaries. And again, you're gonna get this as a printout. Triangles are for manifestation, integration, and creation. And squares are for structure, stability, strength, and consolidation. So as you're thinking about like, oh, what am I gridding for? It's important to keep the shape in mind. So those are three basic shapes. We all know what a circle, what a triangle, and what a square look like. Step up from that, still basic. I'll say still, we'll call them intermediate shapes. A pentagram, we've all seen a pentagram before. It's also called like the witch's star, right? Elemental connection, magical protection, and drawing energy down. So pulling energy from ether and drawing it down. Spirals, just like a basic spiral, like an ammonite shell. Creating an energy vortex. So if you're trying to amplify the energy of something. And then the seed of life, also, which is that flower of life shape, the ultimate creation and manifestation grid, symbolic of the golden ratio. So you could literally just grid, like if you have that tree of life, just cover it in crystals. And that would be the seed of life grid. Do we have any questions about those? No? Okay. So how to grid. We're going to go through quite a few steps, but we're almost through my little packet. So that's exciting. Okay. So location. Location is important. Where are you gridding and why? So say you are like me and you have a business and you're trying to call in the energy of protection, abundance, and community to your business. You want to make the grid inside of your business, maybe closest to where you're going to interact with customers and do a lot of your work, which is what I did with mine. It's behind the check stand, which is where I sit on my computer when I'm doing a lot of the work for the business. It's also where I'm standing when I'm interacting with customers who walk in the door. So having your crystals in an intentional location is important. Having your grid in an intentional location is important. You'll see people who grid sacred sites. I don't know if y'all have ever seen this, but there are groups of people who carry crystals with them and they'll go around to the different sacred sites in the world and set up crystal grids. And it's their way of giving collective healing to the world. And it's really beautiful that they do this. But so for them, location is important. They're going to certain sacred sites for a reason. So just looking at what it is that you're trying to grid for and then making a location selection based off of that. You know, if I have a client who comes in and says like, my son is having night terrors, I might recommend that they do a crystal grid under their son's bed. Right? So just kind of looking at the purpose and what you need. Okay, ritual times. So make sure you have ample amount of time to set the grid. You don't want to be rushed in this process. You want to make sure that you, like if you're like, oh, I want to color a mandala, give yourself enough time to color the mandala, cut it out, smudge it, select all the crystals that you want to use, smudge them, write out your intentions, right? Like I would say give yourself like 2 or 3 hours to set your first grid and really just be in that space of intentionality with it, because the last thing you want to do is feel rushed through the process or just feel like you have to cut out in the process. It's almost like doing a meditation. And some people do crystal grid as a form of meditation, where they'll just set up a grid and then they'll just immediately take it apart. So you can use it in a lot of different ways, but really the intentionality and being focused and present, just as we are with cacao ceremony, is important for gridding as well. We already talked about cleansing, but physically cleaning and energetically cleansing the space you plan to set your grid up in. As well as making time to create the intention of charging and cleansing and charging your crystals. So we didn't talk about charging your crystals, a little bit different than cleansing your crystals. If you want to amplify the energy of your crystals, you charge them. There are lots of ways you can do this. The moon is the most popular. I hear people all the time, can I only charge my crystals in the moon? I'm like, no, you can charge them in lots of different ways, but that is the most popular way. The sun is also a way that you can charge your crystals. Be mindful that some crystals are prone to sun fading. So you just have to be cautious of how long you leave them in the sun. The sun is a very powerful being. We don't stay in the sun for hours at a time without sun protection because we can get burned, right? So your crystals don't need that much time in the sun. You can also put them in the sunlight when the sun isn't super luminous. So if it's a cloudy day and you put them in the windowsill, they're still going to get the energy of the sun, just like we would still get sunburnt if we were sitting outside all day, right? What else? You can also bury them in the earth. That's a very beautiful way to charge your crystals, returning them to earth. So those would be my 3 favorite ways. Any questions about cleansing or charging? Because I know that can be a topic that just like goes on forever. Okay. Template. Yeah. So select which shape or grid layout you would like to use. If you see anything in nature, remembering the Fibonacci sequence, that everything in the universe is created with the golden ratio in mind. If you see something in nature and you're like, oh, that would be a really cool grid, or you see maybe a shape in meditation, because a lot of times, like if you go deep in meditation, you'll get into the quantum field and start seeing shapes. Use your intuition and use those shapes because they're things that are calling to you. You don't have to use what I'm telling you. This is all just a blueprint for you to make the best decision that feels most intuitively correct to you. So I want to give you a sample intention for gridding, right? So that's number 5 is intention. Setting an intention for each stone that you plan to use in your grid, like what I talked about with activation. Writing down the things that you want to activate, but this could be a prayer that you use. And again, you'll get this sent to you. I'm a clear and perfect channel for cosmic creation. I thank these stones for making their way into my life. I ask that their power and unique energies be dedicated to my greatest and highest good, and that they aid harmoniously in the collaboration of my focused intention. I ask that their energies align with this intention of, insert your grid intention here, and that when assembled, the grid will effortlessly aid with this and together with anything else that is beneficial for my greatest and highest good. So that's a nice little invocation that you can use anytime you want to grid. Placement and conjuring, okay? Take your time to carefully align your crystals in a pattern of your desired layout. Notice if any of your crystals move from their perfect placement. This is so important. If we think about crystals as energetic beings, they don't always stay where you put them. And I see this happen a lot when I'm doing grids on clients during crystal healing sessions. A client won't move, but a crystal will. And if it does it and I put it back and it moves a second time, I let it stay where it is. So sometimes that'll look like a crystal, you know, maybe I have it laying on this person, like right here on their upper heart chakra, and it just kind of like wants to roll back over here. And so then I'll just put it back here and it rolls again back over here. And I'm like, okay, crystal, received, heard, you can stay there. Right? Same with this grid. I kind of tidied it up before I showed it to all of you, but these crystals were all in their own space. And this crystal sits in the windowsill all day. So it's not like anybody is over there moving it or bumping into it or whatever. It's just that crystals, they're vibrating, right? And so they move around. So if a crystal is moving and if it keeps moving, just let it do its thing and move. Yeah, what else? Let's see. Drawing energy in, you want to lay your outer stones first. So if we're drawing energy out, we want to lay our inner stones first. So outer stones, drawing energy in, inner stones, radiating energy out. And they'll say your keystone or your center or your generator crystal first. So that looks like my tower. So for this grid, I'm sending out the energy, so I lay that one first. But if I was drawing in the energy, I would lay the out ones first, if that makes sense. You could also enhance your environment by playing the sound bowls. So after you do all of this, or even before, or even during, if you have a set of sound bowls that you work with, or chimes, or whatever kind of sacred sound you might, a flute, whatever you might want to bring in, drums, music is a powerful tool for medicinal activation. Perimeter and anchors. Okay, so placing any necessary boundary stones around the perimeter, great for protective grids or space enhancing grids. So I'll show you an example of that on this grid here. The majority of the crystals that I have on the grid that I showed you earlier are for groundedness, protection, good vibrations, and abundance. But then I have these black tourmaline anchors. They're in the shape of a triangle. And so we talked about that energy earlier. And I just have 2 of them anchored on the outsides to deflect and transmute negative energy. So if anybody is casting that intention towards my space or towards me, the intention behind them being on the grid is that they're anchors. They're really keeping us grounded into the intentions of the grid and keeping away anyone who's seeking, to bestow negative upon the space. Care and deconstruction. Okay, so we talked about the care of the grids, spraying them down. You can keep a grid up for as long or as short as you would like. I treat them the way I treat my altar. So I like to deconstruct them periodically just to dust and to cleanse the energy. If I'm working, so I told you we've been working with this grid for 4 years. So I've never smudged this grid with sage because I don't want to clear the energy out. But I will hit it with some copal or palo santo, right? Because they're not clearing agents, or just spirit spray it. But I'm not trying to reset the energy of this grid so I don't clear it with sage. So yeah, you make the choice of how long you want to keep your grid up for. And deconstructing it, it's just important that you do the same thing you did when you deconstruct it that you did when you set it up, right? So I'm going to remove all of my stones. I'm going to cleanse them. I'm going to clear. So I'm going to use smudge, right? Likely sage. Cedar would be another good one. Yerba Santa. Any of the sage family herbs are going to clear everything. Rosemary as well. I'm going to cleanse it. I'm going to take all my crystals off. I'm going to cleanse my board. I'm going to take everything off. And then I'm going to give it another invocation, but this time it's an invocation of gratitude. So it can be as simple as saying, thank you for using your power to work so hard on my behalf. You are now called to rest and close off that power and intention. This resets the energy of the grid. It also resets the energy of your crystals so that you may use them in a different way. The energetic imprint of grids is powerful and can linger. Okay, so once you have accomplished the goal or feel keen to move on, it's very important to deconstruct your grid. And when you're ready to deconstruct your grid, be sure to cleanse each crystal thoroughly with smoke and then charge it in the earth, the moon, or the sunlight, like we talked about. Thank your stones and leave them with a closing intention like the one that I just told you. So if you can think about, I put it together, and when I'm ready to take it apart, I take it apart. So usually if I'm working with a grid for a specific purpose, I will only have it up until that purpose is fulfilled. So let's say you're manifesting for a new job. Your crystal grid is to manifest a new job. When that new job comes in and you accept that offer, thank your stones, deconstruct, move on. You can decide that you want a grid for something else, and that's fine, but you just don't want all this lingering energy around. I have one client who is obsessed with crystal grids, and he builds them all around his house. And it gives me the heebie-jeebies because I'm like, dude, do you know how much energy you're calling into your space right now without deconstructing and kind of clearing things out? So he's just like got this obsession and this fascination with grids. I mean, I'm talking like 30, 40 grids at a time. So just be mindful, it's with any spiritual practice, just be mindful. Okay, that is the end of our packet. Do we have any questions?
So I have a question. Like, if you don't, I've never made a crystal grid before, so I don't have many crystals like at home on deck. Do you recommend that I slowly just go acquiring what feels aligned, or are there like certain like starter crystals that you would recommend working with?
Yeah, I would. So I love the idea of what you seek is seeking you for building your crystal collection. So as you're going out in the world and visiting local shops and just kind of seeing what feels good, acquiring things that you feel like are calling to you is important. And also, if you're gridding for a specific intention, then you can find stones that are aligned with that intention. I find for crystal grids, because we're creating a very small, it's a very big energetic exchange in a very small container of space, that chip crystals and tiny tumbles work the best. The only crystal that I'm going to make really big usually is going to be the one that's my keystone, or the one right in the middle. And it doesn't even have to be that big. It's really just about the shape. Yeah. But then also we talked about the spiral, right? Like you don't need a keystone for a spiral crystal. You're going to start right here with, I would use maybe, so for a crystal grid, I like to use 2 to 5 different types of crystals. You can use all of the same crystal. That's fine too. You don't have to do that. But like if I were doing a spiral on this grid, I might say I'm doing, okay, this is the part where I'm going to pull a card and we're just going to make an impromptu grid because I don't want to just like guess. So everybody close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And we're calling in the energy of what it is we need this evening as a collective. All right, I'm going to go with this one. Compassion. That's beautiful. Okay. So that's our buzzword, compassion. And I'll read from the deck here in a minute. But when I think about stones for compassion, I think about rose quartz, first of all. So rose quartz, everybody's probably seen. It's this beautiful pink stone. I'm going to go grab some here in a second, but I'll give you an activity to do while I do that. So rose quartz, really beautiful for the energy of compassion, forgiveness, unconditional love, especially radiating love towards the self in order to be able to give that energy outwardly. I think of, this is so interesting. When I think of cacao, I always say she has like a very nurturing and grandmother spirit. Rose quartz is to me of crystals as cacao is of plant medicine. So it's interesting that that card flew out of the deck. So that would be my number one pick for compassion. I'm going to use clear quartz in probably every crystal grid that I do, because the energy of clear quartz is that of amplification, manifestation, and connection to source energy. So its job is to take on whatever intention you give it, and also to connect to the divine. So it will amplify the energy of any intention or any crystal you place it with. So definitely using those two. And then another one for compassion. I think I'm going to use for our generator stone, flower agate. Flower agate, or they also call it sakura agate or cherry blossom agate. It's a really beautiful stone for connecting to the energy of loving kindness towards the self, speaking kind words to the self, and self-compassion. So those are going to be the 3 that I'm going to use for our grid. So while I'm gathering crystals to make this grid for us, on which I'm going to use this cute little heart placement that falls in perfect alignment, I would like each of you to write an intention that's going to activate our grid. So when you hear the word compassion, what you feel like you might need for self-compassion or compassion towards others, whatever is coming up for you as far as compassion is concerned. And when I come back, we will make this grid together. I'm going to put on a song while you do this. Here we go. Can y'all hear the music okay? No? Oh, no. Okay. So I picked out a few different shapes and types of stones. And what I would love is if you can type your intention in the chat if you feel comfortable to share, because I'm going to use it to activate our grid. And then I got out a specific deck of like a little post-it notes, but then I remembered I had these cute little heart ones in my purse that someone gave me. So feels very aligned to use all these heart shapes. So as you're typing your intentions in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and actually going to grab some smudge because we want to clear the energy of this place card. So I'm going to take some yerba Santa sage and just give this little place card a smoke bath. And usually I like to light my herbs off a candle, just so that it's, you know, wick to earth rather than like butane to earth. But the candle that I have going is too narrow for me to stick this smudge down in there. So we're going to just do what we can. Okay, so I've got my smoke going. And I'm just going to ask that the energy of this place card, this grid, be cleared so that we may call in a new energy and intention together collectively. And I'm going to do the same thing with my crystals because they've been on the shop floor and people have probably touched them. And so we're just going to ask that their energy be reset to neutral and cleared so that we may give them a clear intention for showing up as we work through the energy of compassion together. So I picked flower agate, which is one that we talked about, and then also rose quartz, which is another one that we talked about. But I also pulled in some Lumerian seed quartz, which is a clear quartz, but it's an amplified version of clear quartz in that there are certain sites in the world that were home to the Lumerian people. And they are a race of light beings that came and inhabited Earth for a period of time. And it is said that at these sacred sites that they lived at, particularly there's a site in Brazil, and then Mount Shasta is another one, if anybody's ever been there. They lived underneath Mount Shasta, and you can find Lumerian seed quartzes all over Mount Shasta. They have these little barcodes on them, and when you rub them in meditation, you receive these sort of galactic downloads. So these beings didn't speak, they communicated through frequency and light. And when they left Earth, they encoded their wisdom and their knowledge as images through these barcodes in Lumerian seed crystals. So it's used for like divine expansion and is really beautiful for like downloads and spiritual advancement. And also in meditation. So with the energy of compassion showing up, you know, sometimes we need to meditate and spiritually evolve in how we can be more compassionate to ourselves and towards others. So I thought that could be a nice one to draw in as well. Okay, so let's set our grid now that we have cleared our space. And I'm going to go back to that little invocation that I wrote, because I want to use it. So I'm going to take the heart, and I kind of want to do this. I'm going to switch to my phone just for this exercise so that you can see kind of like a overhead bird's eye version of this. Okay. Sorry, I'm muted. I was saying I love the feature on Zoom where you can switch back and forth between devices. Can we all see this okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the center is where I'm going to place our flower agate heart. And then I'm going to place one heart. Let's kind of follow the pattern in each subsequent direction. And I'm just kind of going with the flow here. We'll place some rose quartz, maybe on that inner circle there. And then I'm going to place the Lemurian seed quartz around. And really it's that simple. That is a crystal grid. So we could also take a compassion card and just kind of slide it underneath the grid, right? But then the last thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this off camera, is take those intentions that you all typed in the chat, and I'm going to write them on this piece of paper, and I'm going to stick them right in the center underneath this Sakura agate. So really, when it comes to building a grid, it doesn't have to be super intricate or difficult. It can be, I'm going to switch back to my computer now. Okay. It can be that simple, where you just pull a card, right? And you sit with the intention and you go to your collection and you say, these are the crystals that I have. And you just lay a grid. So this grid, I'll probably keep up at Cosmic. I'm going to keep it for the next 30 days. And we can all maybe check in with each other in Mighty Networks and see how we're feeling after 30 days with our compassion, right? Our self-compassion. So I can see, Jen, will you do me a favor? Will you send me, I can't see the chat anymore because I've gone back and forth between my phone. Do you mind to just send me the intentions so that I can write them on this Post-it note? I'm like, what else? That's really it. And then what I'll do off camera is just put those intentions on this grid. But together as a collective, maybe we can say the invocation to kind of close us out before we do any last and final questions. So I'll just say a line and you can repeat it after me. So everybody take a deep breath in and sigh it out. I am a clear and perfect channel for cosmic creation. I thank these flower agates. I thank these rose quartz. I thank these Lemurian quartz for making their way into my life. I ask that their power and unique energies be dedicated to my greatest and highest good. I ask that they aid harmoniously in the collaboration of our focused intention. I ask that their energies align with this intention, the intention of compassion, and that when assembled, this grid will effortlessly aid with compassion and with anything else that is beneficial for my greatest and highest good. And so it is. We just created a collective crystal grid together. Unmute yourselves. Tell me how you're feeling. Hi, sister.
Well, I am feeling really good. This feels very organic for me and very opening for me. And it gives me some beautiful, beautiful ideas for when I, work with the moon, like especially the full moon, when I work with the intention with some of my yoga students and create a, because I do a specialty class. And I'm always giving them crystals. So whatever that energy is for that full moon, I go and research and like what crystal and what the intention of the crystal is. So now it gives me a great idea to do something for them special this coming full moon. So
yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I wanted to thank you because you said something when I spoke with you on your call that really inspired me. And that was the energy of people being called home to earth medicine.
Mhm.
I really feel that super deeply. And I think that activations like this one are important in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah. I love it. I'm such a nerd. I was telling Jen all day. I was like, yeah, I have this 4-page document. I will share it with y'all. I've been just geeking out all day on crystals. So
I feel like the notes were super helpful because I was very intimidated by this like concept, but now I feel like I can do it. I did have a quick question. Do they need to be like symmetric or like can you just have like an assortment of crystals? Like do you have to have 4 of one and like 8 of another or could like
you do and you don't.
okay.
Well, I would say if you don't have like unified number of crystals to do
Mhm.
like a circle, a square, or a triangle, or a spiral.
Got it. Okay.
That is a little bit less, like needs a little bit less direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Spirals are great because you can do like every other crystal something different. Someone said something I heard that was like, you want to make sure that you're selecting crystals that work well together and not crystals that don't work well together. And I'm like, all crystals work well together. So you don't have to worry about that. If you think about Earth, we think about how crystals show up, they show up in deposits together. You see azurite included in malachite, or you see phantom quartz is chlorite included in clear quartz, or you'll see citrines and amethyst and smoky quartz all forming together in the same deposits. You'll see tourmaline with a quartzite inclusion. So like Earth is not wrong. She's forming them in this way. So you can use them together and there's not going to be any harm. There's also stones that can help when you're dealing with, like, I like to call them extraterrestrial rocks, even though science says they're not, but like moldavite, which is like a really intense stone that occurred like 13 billion years ago over the Czech Republic. And it's got really intense energy for transformation. And for some people, it causes soul fire. So it makes them feel nauseous or get headaches or whatever. So if they get that, I always recommend that they pair it with like black tourmaline or something that will help ground them, hematite, something that will help ground them. So it can be nice to pair crystals together for that purpose too. But if you're like, okay, I have one citrine, one pyrite, one golden healer quartz, right? And then I've got like 5 clear quartzes and I'm trying to set a grid for confidence. That would work totally fine. Any other questions? Or just like how you're feeling, feedback?
Yeah, thanks for doing this. It feels much less intimidating and much more accessible. Like I feel like, okay, I think I can actually make a crystal grid. So thanks.
You totally can. We just did together.
I agree, because I've looked it up before and I've been like, oh man, I'm gonna have to go like buy a bunch of stuff, like, to make it look like exactly this way.
Not at all. And then if you all want to take like a deep dive, I did pull this out to show you. This is a great book. So if you're like, I am obsessed with crystal grids, like my one client who has 40 in his house at a time, and you just kind of want to go on a deep dive, this book is a good blueprint. It's called I think it's called The Ultimate Crystal Grids. It's by Judy Hall. She passed not long ago, but she is kind of the quintessential crazy crystal lady. Like she is our go-to. She wrote the Crystal Bible. Like she's one of the pioneers of crystal healing literature. I will say about Judy Hall, she has a tendency to say this is the way that you do things. And I don't agree with that. I agree that your intuition is the best guide. So if something resonates with you, great. And if it doesn't, that's fine too. But I don't believe in the energy of like this shape. Absolutely. Like she says, you shouldn't wear point pendants because they're draining your energy in one of her books. And I'm like, I don't agree with that. So just kind of going with your intuition and how you kind of feel about things and what your experience is versus what somebody says as bond. I think that's just smart in life, but especially with spiritual stuff and crystal books. But this is a great resource if you want to go deeper. And it's cool because it has like all of these different, like it will teach you how to do body grids as well. So this is like a grid for chakra balancing. And then like it has more complex grid layouts and stuff. And you could even use the book as your grid, right? You could just like lay the book flat and then put whatever crystals you want to use over the images or copy them in a, a copier, but it's a great resource. So yeah. Anything else?
I had a question, Shauna.
Yeah.
So you worked from the inside out. So what can you kind of describe or explain that again? Like, what does that mean? Because you did it that particular way with setting that one up. And then what was your centerpiece? Was that the flower agate?
Yeah, so it's a flower agate heart. So remembering that, and I didn't write this in the notes, but hearts radiate the energy of like unconditional love, and especially heart healing. So using hearts because compassion, when I think of compassion, I think of self-compassion, right? We need to be compassionate to the self in order to radiate that out. But when you place the keystone first, we are radiating the energy out. So basically this grid is radiating the energy of compassion out. So into the world, to each of you, right? To me. But if I were trying to call in the energy of just self-compassion, then I would probably start on the outside. But this is a collective grid, so I want to send this energy to everyone. So keystone first, and then working from the inside out, illuminates the energy out. Outside first, then the center, then the keystone draws the energy in. And that is also in the notes.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And I was really excited because one of the very first crystals I ever got is a really beautiful giant sphere of the flower agate that a friend gifted me. So I really love that the card of compassion showed up and it just being here, like, I'm working for Florisaire, but I'm always so blessed to be in these spaces and receive the medicine. And yeah, just really, really grateful and excited to build something.
Yeah, me too. I love that you have a flower agate sphere too, because that's that soft, divine feminine moon energy just emanating out. I love that. That's beautiful. Anything else? Okay. So to close the space, I'm just going to read the compassion card and we'll see what the Enchanted Blossoms deck has for us. I'll share this with y'all too, because this deck is wonderful. I particularly love this deck because it's like one word, right? So you pull the card, every card has like a little dragon. It's like a dragon butterfly hybrid, which is kind of cool. And then it has a plant that goes with it. And so anyway, but they're very beautifully drawn, but they just have a word. So it's kind of nice. I'll sometimes pull with my cacao if I'm having a hard time coming up with an intention, or I am doing a reflective journaling practice and just need a buzzword. So it's called Enchanted Blossoms. And it's by Carla Morrow, if you find you like what you hear. Okay, compassion. The flower is the elder, and the butterfly is the large blue. With its small white flowers blossoming into bunches of plump berries, elderflower has been featured in folklore from ancient times to our modern legends. Many traditions link elder trees to protection and spirits. As for modern myth, the most powerful wand in the Harry Potter series was a wand made from the elder tree. Domestically, the berries are used in many foods and drinks, such as cordials and fruit pies. Compassion is one of the strongest and most complex of human emotions. Through compassion, we not only feel and understand the feelings and hurts of others, but we may choose to accept those feelings and help relieve the pain. This card is a reminder to breathe and have sympathy for yourself and your situation. Do not be too hard on the way you think, you feel, or on your outward goals. All things take time, and sometimes we need space to heal before we can reach our goals. Empathy moves us to listen to the others, to see if we can offer kindness to those in need. We may not agree with every view or idea people express, but we can show how compassion while holding our own views sacred helps. There's 2 questions that go with this card for journaling. How can I show myself more compassion and understanding? And who needs my compassion today? So with that, bringing your hands to your heart center. Taking a deep breath in and an audible exhale out through the mouth. Closing with the intention of I radiate self-compassion and loving kindness towards myself in order to reflect it out towards others. I'm so grateful each of you is here tonight, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your evening. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Shonna.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. That was wonderful.
It was awesome. I loved it so much.